Former Vice President of the United States and Nobel laureate Al Gore is, of course, today the world's best-known climate change crusader. He's here in India, in New Delhi, in fact, leading a very interesting climate reality project, actually training people on the issues that revolve around climate change. That should be the most important issue that confronts the world, but somehow many people still continue to be in denial. It's a pleasure to welcome Al Gore to our program this afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us. Let me start by asking you if you're struck by the irony. You're here in Delhi, the national capital of India, which is the world's most polluted city. And yet all of us could not get that to be a major issue in the recently concluded elections in Delhi. So are you struck by the irony? You're sitting in the hotbed of pollution. How does that feel?
Well, it's interesting that in China, this air pollution issue has become linked to the climate crisis.
Yes.
Because the same activities that cause one also cause the other.
Exactly.
And it is a very powerful issue in China. My sense here is that it is just beginning to be a very powerful issue here. Just yesterday, a report was released by the doctors and scientists showing that the average Indian is losing more than 3 years of life because of the air pollution.
Yeah.
And the number of cases of hospitalization related to air pollution is really quite high. There are many other measures of the damage that's being done. A friend of mine here told me that because some of the activities that have long created air pollution in Delhi and in India have gone on for so long that it's not a new concern. But the rapid increase in coal burning has added so much to the air pollution that now all of a sudden many people are beginning to recognize the serious health consequences related to it.
And we saw the American embassy here actually moving to start air pollution monitors, and they're going to be doing that in embassies around the world. It's obviously one way of putting pressure on policy. Do you think it's a good way? Because sometimes countries get defensive. You know, who are the Americans to come here and tell us about our air? I mean, you've dealt with that kind of defensiveness from countries, right?
Yes, but the people want the truth. In my culture and faith tradition, there is a famous saying, you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. And if you ask the average person in the United States or in India or in any country, do you want to know what the real figures are on air pollution? Everyone would say yes, of course. And in China, the embassy monitors really caused quite a stir. And it was controversial several years ago when it started there. But then Chinese citizens started buying the same monitors and putting them on their own roofs, and it was an unstoppable trend toward free information. I don't think there's resistance to having accurate measurements of the air. It's been done for 2 years by the embassy here, and it's been publicly available since last June. But I think that too is beginning to have an impact. Maybe some of the numbers on air pollution weren't as trusted before. Maybe trust is maybe the wrong word. Maybe people just didn't know how accurate they were. But I think that if these new scientific measuring instruments can be used widely, people will realize they're accurate, and then they'll react accordingly.
You know, when President Obama was here, Bloomberg did a story saying that his time here had taken 6 hours of his life. That's how stark it is even for all of us who live here. But you must have dealt with denial when it comes to talking about issues of climate change, pollution. It's almost as if people feel it won't happen to me, it'll happen to somebody else. It's a little bit like telling a smoker to give up cigarettes. So how do you wrap your head around that denial in nations and people?
Well, that's a great question, and we know the answers. I'm not the expert, but the experts have given us the answers to these questions, but it's not a simple answer. First of all of us as human beings would prefer not to think about anything that's unpleasant. Sure. So if there's any excuse we can find to say, well, I'll think about that another time, we naturally push it off. Secondly, the fact that this climate issue is a global issue makes it even harder to wrap our heads around it.
Yeah.
And of course, if it seems that the solutions will be difficult or possibly painful, that's yet another reason why people would not want to think about it. Here's one thing that's changed, though. The rapid reductions in the cost of solar electricity and wind electricity, and the exciting ways for businesses and homeowners to save money with new energy efficiency technologies. These things are now making it very exciting to cut the pollution and build the economy at the same time. And look at the hundreds of millions who don't have any electricity at all. Now, for the first time, with solar collectors on their rooftops, the solar photovoltaic panels, then electricity for lights and computers and so forth can be shared with the 300 million people who have none today. So
But
it's a very exciting development.
But you know, while you're celebrating the possibilities that emerge from solar power getting cheaper, what else has got cheaper? Oil. So now, with oil prices going down, are you worried that, in a sense, the fight for alternative sources of energy just got that much tougher? It may have helped economically across the world, but it makes the entire debate around renewable and non-renewable energy sources that much more complicated because oil is cheaper now.
I actually don't think it's going to have that effect for two reasons. First of all, the cost of solar electricity is now cheaper than even these low oil prices, and cheaper than electricity from coal in many parts of the world. Secondly, India is partially an exception to this, but in most of the world, oil is not burned to make electricity.
Yeah.
And when the price comes down, many countries, including India, Prime Minister Modi announced the removal of the government subsidies for diesel. So in lots of countries, you're seeing the removal of those subsidies with this temporary decline in the price of oil. And finally, the price of solar electricity is a little bit like the price of computer chips or mobile telephones. It has not only come down, it is continuing to go down year by year by year.
Yeah.
And so people can see the future, and if you switch to solar electricity, your incremental cost is zero. Whereas if you're burning diesel or coal, every year you have that fuel cost coming over and over and over, and people know the price is going to go back up again.
Yeah.
Once you make the initial investment on solar, then it pays for itself many times over in the years ahead.
You had a proposal that the world should spend about $90 trillion to make all the major cities free of vehicles, or vehicular traffic free of cars. Do you believe that that's realistic at all? We can't even get people in our cities to take the subway or the metro, the tube, whatever you want to call it, instead of their cars. So you're thinking of a car-free world.
That actually wasn't my proposal. It was a United Nations sponsored proposal headed up by the former president of Mexico, Felipe Calderon.
Yes.
And secondly, the $90 trillion figure was the amount that's going to be spent on urban environments in the decades to come, whether it's spent wisely or not. So I think their proposal was a little bit misunderstood. But to get to the substance of your question, yes, we should change urban transportation systems. Many cities are designed now as if the guiding principle was make sure all the automobiles are happy. We should try to make sure all the people are happy. We don't really need to take a few thousand pounds of metal with us everywhere we go. The new development of electric vehicles is a very exciting development. And rapid bus transit. Many Indian cities have already begun this. It's a great way to cut down on the traffic jams and the air pollution that we were talking about before. And with the trend toward urbanization in the world, less so in India. It's here too. In China, that's a very big trend. And worldwide, it's a big trend. More than half the people in the world now live in cities for the first time in human history, on the way up to 70%. And so making our cities more efficient is really important. Cities, energy systems, agriculture, forestry. These are the big systems that we need to make cleaner and more efficient.
When President Obama was here, there was a climate change pact, an environmental action pact. But if Washington was hoping for a kind of China-style pact on reducing emissions, that did not happen. How do you assess the movement on climate change issues by India so far?
Well, I think the most exciting development in the world today, where renewable energy technology is concerned, is Prime Minister Modi's plan to dramatically expand photovoltaic solar and wind and energy efficiency. This is really exciting. And of course, people around the world know that when he was Chief Minister in Gujarat State, that I believe more than 2/3 of all the solar panels in India were installed when he was heading up Gujarat. So he has credibility when he makes this kind of plan public. So I think that's really quite significant, because when the marketplace changes, it can sometimes have a bigger impact than government policies. And if the government reduces subsidies for the dirty energy and encourages the clean energy, and the marketplace is pushing in that direction anyway, then I used the example of cell phones earlier. You know, there was a time when people said, oh, we have to build landline telephone networks in all the developing countries in the world. Well, when the mobile phones came, people said, well, we don't need the landlines. These are better. And now in developing countries, there's more commerce on mobile phones than there is in the United States or in Europe.
So you're saying technology alters the nature of the debate, in a sense?
I think it does. It absolutely does. You know, there's a difference in temperature between 0 degrees and 1 degree in the mountains. It's the difference not of just 1 degree, it's the difference between ice and water. And in markets, the difference between cheaper than and more expensive than is a similar threshold. And when the new technologies become cheaper than the old ones, then you might as well get out of the way, because the market is going to push toward the more efficient and more affordable technologies.
But were you disappointed that it wasn't the kind of pact that, for example, the United States was able to sign with Beijing? That in India, the debate around the carbon footprint or a reduction in emissions is very much linked to perceptions of equality vis-a-vis the developed world. You know, the argument that you hear again and again, we're an emerging economy, we're still developing. It's the developed world that is already industrialized that should take the burden now, the financial burden and the moral burden of climate change, of reducing global warming.
Well, the short answer to your question is no, I was not disappointed, partly because my expectations and those of others had long since been set on a realistic course well in advance. But secondly, we sometimes use these two categories, developed and developing, as if every country falls neatly into one category or the other. China and India are in very different circumstances. The per capita emissions of global warming pollution in China per capita now exceed those of Europe, and it is almost twice as much overall as the United States. India is a fast-growing country, growing faster either already or soon, faster than China. But the base of its overall economy is still not what China's is. And so it's only realistic to take a good, careful look at what the real circumstances are and bet on the future. India, this is going to be, in significant measure, India's century. It is likely to become the biggest market in the world at some point in this century. The human resources and technology and science, and I'm not saying this to flatter your audience. Your audience knows it to be true. We in the United States certainly know it to be true. What percentage of the CEOs in Silicon Valley have come from India? And now you're seeing these exciting developments here. There's no question about the fact that partway through this century, India is going to be modern, dynamic in every possible respect, and then you're going to see a different perception. And if treaties are arrived at or international agreements a few decades from now, then of course the circumstances will be different.
But to my question on how the inequality debate persists any climate change protocol. We've seen this happening in Peru in 2014. It may happen again in Paris when the world collects to try and agree on a new consensus. How do you respond to the perception in developing countries, hey, you guys got your industrialization, you guys are developed, now you want us to bear equal burden when the burden should be yours?
No one is saying bear an equal burden. No, the West, or to put it another way, the wealthier countries have long since come to grips with the underlying principles of justice that have to be applied to any kind of global undertaking like that to solve the climate crisis. But at the same time, if you take all of the developing countries as a group, their global warming pollution is now more than the wealthy countries as a group.
Yeah.
And all of the growth is in the developing countries. So having robust economic growth on a sustainable basis is the absolute right. Nobody quarrels with that whatsoever. But avoiding the kinds of mistakes that were made in the past by countries that developed at an early historical time is in everyone's best interest. You would not, for example, to go back to the telephone analogy, insist upon putting telephone poles to every single home and village throughout India when there is a cheaper and better way to do it now. The same thing is true with non-polluting modern versions of technologies that were old and dirty and expensive and polluting in the past.
But how do you get past the sort of rich-poor dynamics in this debate? For example, I read somewhere that you'd spoken about the damage caused by kerosene stoves in India in terms of generating pollution. Now, these are really used by our poorer people. So it's very difficult, I think, for political establishments to get people to care about issues such as pollution when they're struggling to meet two ends meet. So how do you get around that?
Well, here again, technology can help us find good solutions to that problem. Indian engineers and scientists have developed stoves that are far more efficient, cheaper for the householders to use, that generate not only less global warming pollution, but less indoor air pollution, and are associated with fewer hospitalizations and fewer deaths and diseases from the air pollution that is inside the homes. You know yourself what a serious problem that is in India. So in my country, as in yours, old patterns and cultural traditions sometimes take time to change. Everyone understands that. But again, if you can save money and be healthier at the same time, give children a better opportunity to be able to study in the nighttime hours without the fumes going into their lungs, then over time people say, oh, of course, that's better. Let's do it the new way.
What about the carbon footprint of the United States of America? How much of a resistance do you face from the fossil fuel lobby? How powerful does that lobby continue to be in your own country? Because a number of people would say, first tell us about the United States.
Yes, well, I'm embarrassed to have to answer this question, but of course I must, because you're right. The oil and coal and gas companies in the United States have far too much political power. But in spite of that, we have come to a point now in the U.S. where actually our global warming pollution under President Obama has been reduced more than that of any other nation. There are virtually no new coal plants being built in the United States today, and all of the ones that were proposed, almost all of them have been canceled. Many of the existing plants are being shut down. Approximately half of all of the new energy investments in the U.S. now are in solar and wind. And that's true worldwide if you look at the new investments. For the last several years, renewables have surpassed the old fossil fuels as the clear choice of the investor community and the business community.
You know, we of course know you for, among many things, for Inconvenient Truth. What have you found the toughest in your crusade to get the world to stand up and take notice on climate change, on global warming, on pollution? What is it that you encounter? Is it lobbies? Is it ignorance? Is it denial? Is it struggling to find a language to, you know, that appeals to the ordinary person, which is not too technical? What is the toughest thing you face in getting your message across?
Well, first of all, I feel a sense of excitement and joy and optimism. We're going to solve this crisis.
Yeah.
It has taken us too long, but now the world is moving. We're going to solve this. So I'm happy about it. I'm very excited about it.
You're not grim and pessimistic?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Partly for the reasons we discussed earlier, the new technologies are becoming so cheap. This helps a great deal. But also because the average citizen in India, in the United States, all over the world, has noticed the weather is changing dramatically. The monsoon is changing here. Yeah. The pattern of floods and heavy rainfalls are changing. The sea level is rising. The ice in the mountains is melting. All of these and other changes are visible now. So to the extent that we have come to the point where we're really past the time where we were stalled, I think Mother Nature deserves the most credit for it, because her voice is very difficult to ignore. Yeah. And all over the world, people are saying, oh yes, my grandparents and parents have told me it didn't used to be like this.
Yeah, yeah. But do you find that there is now a greater awareness of what's at stake? Or do you find that in many ways you were ahead of the curve and you continue to be ahead of the curve, that when you put forth ideas, people initially used to think your ideas were outlandish? Like I remember early on you used to talk about sending, you know, about observing climate change from space. And today that's actually happening, the zombie satellite as it's being called. So do you find that the world is still playing catch up with some of the ideas that people may have laughed at you for once upon a time, but are today forced to confront?
Well, all I have done really is listen carefully to the best scientists and ask them to be patient with me and repeat themselves enough times so that I can understand it as a layperson, and then I have tried to communicate what they have taught me. They are the ones who are ahead of the curve. And what they are saying now is that this crisis is still far more serious than most people realize. It's so big that it's intimidating, and so it is sometimes easier not to think about it. But like me, they are now encouraged that there is movement in political systems. We're still moving too slowly. We did start late, but the momentum is building, and we're going to solve it.
In India, we're in the midst of a huge debate on how to balance the needs of the environment with the needs of development. And the previous government actually found itself accused of being far too soft on the environmental lobby. The present government finds itself accused quite often of, you know, bypassing environmental clearances. How do countries find this balance? And how are people to believe that it's not either or?
Well, the evidence shows very clearly that these two goals are not in conflict at all. In fact, the economists have abundant evidence that when people die from air pollution in record numbers, this hurts the economy as well. We care about the people, of course, and we're not used to thinking of economic losses in those terms, but it's actually the case. And the new investments that create jobs are in the renewable energy sector. This is the exciting pathway toward the future, not just because we're going to save the future of human civilization. That should be a good enough goal, but it's also going to lift the global economy and provide jobs for people who need them here in India and in my country.
And there's also now a feeling that these kind of climate change issues and environmental degradation have in parts of the world led to actual conflicts. I mean, I know Sudan was quite often understood in those terms.
Yeah,
so it's not just about economic losses, is it?
Not at all, and militaries around the world have begun to really focus on this. I'll give you another specific example. We see the horrors in Syria today.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at how this started, there were many causes, but perhaps the principal cause was a climate-related drought from 2006 to 2010 that destroyed 60% of the farms in Syria, 80% of the livestock in Syria, drove 1 million refugees from the farms into the cities, where they collided with another million refugees from the Iraq War. And the secret documents that were released by WikiLeaks showed the discussions inside the Syrian government many years ago saying, we can't handle this. There's going to be a social explosion. And there was. Again, other factors contributed, of course. But security experts look at many regions around the world, and they see governments that are just barely hanging on in some places, even in good times. And with the extra pressure from climate-related droughts and floods and the catastrophes that drive climate refugees across borders, then it frequently becomes more than some of these governments can handle. And so, yes, there is a security dimension to
this as well. Now, because I know you do follow the news in India, it's quite evident in this conversation. Are you at all concerned on a personal note that the climate change panel with which you shared a Nobel, the head of that panel today is embroiled in such a big controversy here at home with a sexual harassment charge that he's had to skip the next climate change panel in Nairobi? So, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I know a lot of Indians are talking about it.
I have no comment on that. He's made many good contributions to the leadership of the IPCC, but I have no comment on the other.
Let me ask you in the end, your message to skeptics, because I know you deal with skeptics everywhere, your message to skeptics who may look at you and say, you're an alarmist. You must get to hear that a lot. Do people call you an alarmist? Or not quite? They've come to accept what you're saying.
Not much anymore.
Not much anymore.
Some people, I think he was being humorous, but one of our greatest columnists in the U.S. wrote a column saying that I should apologize for understating the dangers
Maybe he was being ironic
with this crisis. I think he was, yes. But I don't hear the alarmism much anymore. Perhaps some of the carbon polluters will still trot that out every once in a while.
But we haven't in India had this be a major election issue. It's not an issue that people vote on yet. And I just want to end with you addressing Indians here who are perhaps still in denial about whether it's air pollution or global warming. And why just Indians? Your message to everybody why should we spend more time thinking about climate change than we do?
Many people have already felt in their own lives the changes in these extreme weather events. They're becoming far more frequent, far more excessive in their impact. And this is just the beginning, because the scientists did predict this, and now we've seen it happen. They're telling us that if we did not act, much, much worse would lie in our future. And so I myself think about my children and grandchildren. The day will come not long from now when the next generation will ask us one of two questions. If they live in a world where all these terrible events unfold, they would be justified in looking back and asking us, what were you thinking? Why didn't you act? But if they live in a world with all these millions of new jobs in solar and wind and the other new occupations that will come from solving this crisis, I want them to look back and ask us, how did you find the moral courage to change and to take a different, safer pathway into the future? And I think most people, when they think about it in those terms, are coming to say, yes, we've got to solve this.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, Al Gore. I hope despite the air pollution, you have a good stay in Delhi. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.